guys, it's Sam. Today I want to do a book chat on required reading in school and how it tends to vary for a lot of us and what that means about like foundational education and the assumption that we all have that each of us have kind of read certain things from the literary canon. That's a long title that I will shorten for the actual title, but that is what this book chat is going to be about. So it's just kind of be talking about the things that I did and didn't read in high school / college and the books that I plan on reading because I feel like they're filling that void of things that I feel that I should have read by now. This is in no way saying that any books are required to read, that you're not a reader if you don't read these books. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. This is completely my own ideas of books that I feel that I should have read by now, but it's in no way saying that if you didn't read these books in your education that you had a bad education, or if you didn't read certain things, or if you don't want to read these books or whatever, that you're somehow a bad reader. I'm not saying that whatsoever. It's just kind of my discussion of kind of assumptions we have and education and books that I just feel I should have read by now. Kind of rambling. We're gonna kind of go through this. I didn't make notes for this, so we're gonna kind of go through this and see what happens with this discussion. So first off, I kind of want to go through what I did with high school. I know high school is very different for different countries, different states, and everything, and kind of what the core curriculum is. I did go to a private school, so my curriculum was a little different. There's obviously state requirements, but I didn't do what a lot of the people in public school did. I read a lot of books that weren't from that typical literary canon. I read some that were, which I'll talk about, and some that weren't. So for freshman year of high school, the big thing that I remember reading and focusing on was Romeo and Juliet. That is the only Shakespeare play that I have read for school. I very briefly skimmed over Macbeth at one point in high school because helping another friend at another school with their paper. But I myself never really read Macbeth, never really studied any other Shakespeare plays. We just studied Romeo and Juliet. We watched multiple film versions. We had to recite the different passages of Romeo and Juliet depending on if you were a boy or a girl. Oh my gosh. Then sophomore and junior year was kind of a mix of American literature and American history and stuff like that. So we were reading a couple different books that revolved around slavery and such and around racism. Although we never read To Kill a Mockingbird in my high school, I feel like To Kill a Mockingbird is one of those books that everybody has read. And I have not yet. It's one of the books that I now own, but I have not read that book because it wasn't a part of our curriculum, and then just time passed, I never picked it up, and now I'm sitting here at 26 like, why have I not read this book? So that is going to be remedied very soon, hopefully. We did read All Quiet on the Western Front, which I know some people have read and some people haven't, but that's a World War II historical fiction novel, so that is one that's sort of part of canon, but sort of not. It's kind of a modern classic, kind of isn't. Yeah, we ended up reading a lot of books that aren't really the books that are typical canon. They kind of went outside of the canon. For example, I took a little section that was kind of on Gothic literature within my high school. One of the English courses had a little bit of Gothic literature in it. So instead of reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I feel like everybody has read in America in high school, I just feel like that's one of those books that everybody just gets growing up in American high schools. I did not read that. I instead read The Monk, and I will put the author here. But it's another kind of classic Gothic book, but it's not as well known, I feel like, as Frankenstein. So again, another book that I now have that I plan on reading, but that I didn't read because of school or anything like that. It was never something that was required. Also, junior year of high school, we read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, which I still have a bad taste in my mouth about. It's one of my least favorite books, and I actually had to reread it for a college course. Did not enjoy it. I really love Apocalypse Now, which if you guys don't know is a movie about Vietnam, but that's actually based on Heart of Darkness, so that's a really fun kind of retelling, and it's a really good movie, but I did not enjoy the actual story, and analyzing the story 8 million different ways, I absolutely hated it. In my high school, we also read The Crucible, as well as The Scarlet Letter. I personally did not read The Scarlet Letter because I didn't feel like it. I know, it's crazy, readers, we should all read everything, but I didn't want to read it and didn't want to force myself through it, and so I kind of knew the basic themes and kind of went with it, and I was fine. Don't tell my English teachers from high school. But The Crucible was another big one, and I feel like that's one that everybody in American high schools ends up reading. I'm not sure if that's true for abroad as well, but that's one that we really focused on, so I did read that. And then senior year, we were taking a lot of British lit, and I'm trying to remember some of the other books that we read during that time, but I don't remember. There was like 12 different books, but I can't remember all of them. I feel like possibly Dorian Gray was senior year, but then again, I'm not really sure if it was or not, and there's a bunch of books that happened during that year, but I don't feel like there was any literary classics that really stood out besides Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This I did have to read for high school. I ended up really enjoying it, but it's one that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily have to read Pride and Prejudice for school. I don't feel like that's a very often assigned book, even though it is a classic. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys all feel like you had to read Pride and Prejudice in high school, but I just don't feel like this one was a frequently assigned book. Again, I could be wrong. And then in college, unlike so many people on BookTube, I did not study English. So I was not in English classes. I had one English class and it ended up being more of like a creative writing thing than an actual reading class. So I did not read a ton of assigned books, fiction works in college. So nothing really got added to my like literary canon or anything in college because I wasn't assigned anything because I wasn't in a ton of English classes. So I feel like there's some books that are now lagging behind that I feel like a lot of people read as teenagers, and I have not read those. I wouldn't necessarily say this one is for teenagers or anything, but I have not read Moby Dick. I think a lot of people end up reading this in college and doing like discussions, and that is something that I feel like I would have loved for a lot of these classes I'm about to show. I honestly feel like I should have read a lot of these in college and gotten like the discussion and stuff out of them. I wasn't an English major. I almost was, but I didn't end up being an English major, so I didn't get a lot of these group discussions, which I feel like would have been really awesome for a lot of these classics. But I'm so glad I'm reading these now when I'm involved with BookTube and blogging and stuff, because then I can still have those discussions with other people who've read the book, and we can discuss like themes and stuff, because I think that classics like this and some of the other ones I'm going to show are just really a lot more valuable when you're having a discussion with a lot of people, because it can be interpreted so many ways and they've stood the test of time and everything else. It's kind of like any other book we read. I love having discussions about books, period, but especially for classics, I feel like they're just nicer to read kind of as a group and to really talk about everybody's feelings about them and different interpretations of them and everything else. So this is one that I feel like a lot of people read during college, possibly, and I did not. Again, the previously mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird, which is on my list for hopefully getting to very, very soon, but again, this is one I feel like a lot of people read in high school. I also mentioned Frankenstein, another one that I feel like a lot of people have read and that I would like to have discussions with and stuff. I might read this during Halloween season because I feel like a lot of people end up buddy reading this during Halloween, so I might jump in on one of those buddy reads that ends up happening about once a year here on BookTube. Then I also haven't read a ton of other classic authors. I've only read one Dickens, and that was A Tale of Two Cities. I loved that. I didn't have to read that for school, I don't believe. Maybe I did. I can't remember. I feel like I'm losing a lot of chunks of memory from high school, but I ended up reading that around the same time as high school, so maybe it was a sign, maybe it wasn't, but that's the only Dickens that I've read. I haven't read any Steinbeck, I haven't read any Virginia Woolf, I've only read one Margaret Atwood, and that was my own choosing. I haven't read any Hemingway, stuff like that, where I feel like there's people I should have read. Toni Morrison, possibly. I know Beloved is really common now on a lot of syllabuses and such, and I haven't read any of that. So there's just a lot of books that I feel like I should have had on my literary foundation that I didn't. Again, I'm not saying that if you also don't, that you are any lesser or anything like that. This is just my own personal kind of bucket list for reading. There's just certain books that I feel like I want to have read at this point and want to read soon, or want to have, you know, on my bucket list. Like before I die, I would like to have read some of these books. And these are kind of like the classic books that I have a little bit of self-guilt for. Again, it's not any kind of outside projection or anything, but I have a little bit of self-guilt for not having read yet. So here's some of the books that I feel like I want to add to my kind of literary foundation and have read, because then you can compare a lot of books to some of these classics that everybody knows. So when you start kind of going outside of the realm of the like, everybody has read these, the very typical classics, and you're getting into classics that not everyone has read, I feel like then it's easier to be like, oh, this classic reminds me of this author or this book, and you can kind of make comparisons, and it's a lot easier to kind of go outside the general, what everyone has kind of read, into all some of these different ones that are also classics that not everyone has read. And I want to do more of that. I want to get into some classics that are still classics, but that aren't necessarily on like school curriculums and such, and I think it'll be much easier once I have that kind of foundation. So this was a bit of a rambly video. I didn't take any notes or anything, I just kind of went with it because these are kind of my like off-the-cuff thoughts about it. But comment down below, let me know if there's any books that you feel a little bit of, again, self-guilt about not having read yet, that you feel like maybe were left out of your education and you wish they wouldn't have been, things like that. Comment down below and let me know. I would love to know some of the things that you feel you were missing, or that you love that they were on your education, or feel like something else could have been replaced, or anything like that. Comment down below and let me know. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!